At 5 o'clock, an alarm on my phone goes off with very beautiful music that says, "You are patient and loving." And I leave my office and anything that's going on there that may not be patient and loving. And I walk out of my office and I enter my space with my husband as a patient and loving wife.
This is Intentionally Ever After. Join intentional lifestyle coach Joe Bukartek for a series of personal conversations and coaching sessions with various people about how living with intention shows up for them.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Intentionally Ever After. Today, I am very excited to be joined by the great Tricia Brouk. Tricia, welcome.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me, Joe. What a nice introduction. The great. Wow, I love it.
Good. Well, it continues on because I'm going to ask you to kindly introduce yourself to folks.
For sure. I am in New York City, currently looking out of my window. It's a beautiful sunny day on 55th and 9th. I live across the street from the Alvin Ailey Dance Theater. I moved to New York City 30 plus years ago to pursue a career in dance and had an amazing career. I moved from dance to choreography to writing and directing. I also make documentary films. And I also support speakers in taking TED stages and building out their speaker platform. And I have the privilege of supporting someone that you're super close to, your amazing wife, Melanie. We're currently working together, and it's just such a pleasure to help amplify and elevate her voice. That's what I do. That's what I'm all about.
It sounds pretty fantastic. Also fantastic that you are partnering with Melanie.
It's a pleasure.
So it sounds like you have a lot on your plate, a lot of exciting things, a lot of things that you have curated to be part of your life. What does it mean to you to live intentionally?
I love that you used the word curated, Joe. I always start with super clarity around my desired outcome. That's what I begin with. And once I'm clear on the desired outcome, then I move into the knowing, and then I move into the designing and the curating and the deliberate, purposeful way of showing up in order to achieve the desired outcome.
Sounds like a good formula. So how does that show up for you? Do you have a planning period? Is this for professional life? How does this actually show up for you if I were to peer in the window and see you doing this action?
Before this podcast, I sat down quietly and determined for myself what my desired outcome was. And again, it's not a control thing or like it has to go a certain way. It's really what do I want from this moment with you? I would like for us to have fun. I would like for us to go deep. I would like for us to have a conversation that's exciting and also in service of your audience. Now, how do I do that? Well, I trust that you are going to be an incredible host. I know that the experience is going to unfold the way it's meant to. And I show up prepared. And that's how I can accommodate the universe's how with creating my desired outcome.
I like that idea of the universe's how. Is that touching on the idea that there's always going to be external circumstances that you cannot control?
Without question. If I can put out into the universe my desires and be very conscious and mindful and intentional, the how is not my business. It's the universe's. And that's how I try to show up every single day in my life, in my company, in my community. And that's the intentional way of living is if I'm showing up fully committed to being curious, kind, loving, respectful, dignified, at a high level of excellence, then my desired outcome, which might be 5 years from now, is going to unfold the way the universe has it in mind for me.
What types of tips and tricks or maybe materials do you use for tracking this type? Is it pen and paper, What are your tools of the trade?
That's such a funny question. I hadn't thought about tools of the trade for being able to track desired outcome in relationship to source. I love this. I am somebody who writes in my journal. I do a lot of tracking when it comes to my business. I do a lot of data collecting. I go back and see what I accomplished last year based on my desires and my goals. I look and see what I have planned for the next 5 years. So although I am very connected to source and universe and believe in the knowing, I'm also an action taker and I collect data. So it's very important to me that my intentionality is spirit driven, but also action, planning, and accomplishing. And so when I think about writing in my journal, how do I want to design my day? That's something I do every morning. I start with gratitude and then I move into the design of my day. And sometimes that means asking the universe to show me the evidence that I'm still connected. And that will show up for me usually in seeing the numbers 827 every hour on the hour in my day, whether it's the microwave, my watch, the clock, my computer. I see those numbers in various ways. So I'm constantly being reminded by source that I'm connected. And that helps me also track, okay, if I'm not in flow, if I'm having a bad day, if I'm having a low vibe day, I need to take a minute and reconnect to my intention so that I can show up my fullest for myself, my family, my community, my team. And that's something I take very seriously.
You already sensed my next question of how do you recalibrate back if you catch yourself off or something outside of you takes you off your trajectory. It sounds like you have a pretty instantaneous way of recalibrating to that.
There's a couple ways. I will literally change my environment immediately. I will go into a new location. I will make the conscious choice to change my mind. And this is something that I find so simple and so hard. It's so easy for us to change our mind, but we don't. We spend so much time managing our stories and revisiting the past and living in a place that's causing us suffering and all the things that create the external problems. And when we change our location and change our mind, we can instantaneously reconnect to a higher vibration. But that's the work. We don't want to as human beings. It's so much better to suffer. It's so much easier to tell ourselves the stories. I can't take a TED stage. I'm not smart enough. I can't be a speaker that gets paid $15,000. I don't have a book. Lies, lies, lies. So when
Yes.
I'm low vibe, whether it's because I'm tired or my bandwidth isn't where I want it to be, or I've allowed a client to activate me, any of those things, we're all human beings. Any of those things can happen. So it's my responsibility to reset to my intention, which is to be in excellence, curiosity, love, respect, kindness, take a walk and remind myself, what am I doing? What's important and how do I get back there?
A word that I didn't hear you say that I was listening for is one that I often use in this context is reframing.
Great.
I do constant reframing in the work that I do, and it sounds like that's a very powerful, instantaneous, maybe simple fix for getting you back on track.
Absolutely. And when I'm working with speakers, that is absolutely something that that language and that word, I will ask them to think about as well. What if we reframe this a little bit, right? I was having a conversation with someone recently who had just lost a loved one. And they were speaking in a place of victim, which of course, grief is grief. And we all have our own version of how we show up when we're in a place of loss. And they were talking about spending the last few weeks with this person before she passed and how it was so upsetting and angering to this person. And I, with love, heard everything they were saying and also asked them to reframe, which was, you gave this person a gift of being with her for the last several weeks of her life. That is so incredibly powerful and beautiful. And in that moment, I could see her reframing it in her own mind, and it created a place of space. Didn't make the pain go away, but it gave her more space with which to live in this moment. So I love reframing, absolutely.
Yeah, well, super helpful for her, but it sounds like there's a validation piece in there as well, that these feelings are very real. And this was a wonderful thing that came out of this as well during this period, during this situation that in itself is not wonderful. But, I talk a lot about the victim player mentality, right? And that it's a continuum, right? So it's the same situation, but it's how you choose to respond. And in coming from the victim mentality, it's nothing you can do. The world is going to do what it wants with you, right? But the player, the world's still going to do what it's going to do. But how do you choose to respond? How do you choose to show up and engage? And you can choose that at any given point, any given situation throughout the day, throughout any situation you're going through, whether it's health or something maybe insignificant about what you're going to have for dinner, right? If the cafeteria is out of the chicken, okay, going super surface level, right? But how do you choose to respond?
Right, I love that.
Right? Do you walk out the door? But we're all given these opportunities to make that decision on what we choose to do.
That's so true. And if we go back to intention, is our intention to have an amazing life where we're happy and yes, happy and sad coexist. But if we choose to have the life that is expansive, that requires us to do a lot of reframing as human beings.
For sure. There's time for grief, right? Grief is grief, and you need to be allowed to do that. I'm not suggesting you skip over that part at all.
Nor am I.
Right. So there's room for all of this, right? You can choose to take control, your ability to respond in the situation as well, as you continue to process through your grief.
For sure.
What is one change in habit that has had an exponential payoff for you?
I have 0 notifications on any device. No notifications. I don't want to know if anybody's reaching out to me. I have an emergency place where my husband can find me if he needs to. I'm not distracted by anything on any device. And I don't take any calls before 11 a.m. It's really important to me to give myself enough time in the morning for study, for exercise, for meditation, for intention setting, so that I can be my best self, the best version of myself for my community, for my speakers, for my clients, for my podcast hosts. And those are habits that for me have had an exponential payoff. And the 11 a.m. didn't start until the pandemic. I would have clients sometimes at 7 a.m. depending on where they lived. But what I realized at the height of that uncertainty and energetic chaos in New York City was that I needed to do me for 4 hours. And that doesn't mean 4 hours of television watching. That was 4 hours of intentional self-care.
That's a great combination of things. What's your narrative around that? I know obviously you kindly shared very openly here what it was, but what's the setup, or what did you need to let people know about that boundary, if anything?
I got really vocal about it. I even write about it in my book. And I give context is that I don't have kids, so I'm not expecting anyone who has children to be able to have this kind of luxury where the first 4 hours of their day is about them. And I also believe if you can find 5 minutes, and everybody can find 5 minutes, that kind of deliberate self-reflection, meditation, breathing, bicep curl will set you up for success, no matter what you do in the world. And so I started talking about it. Why is this helpful for me? Because the world is in crisis. The government is in crisis. Things are really intense right now, which means I have to make sure that I am held together so that I can support my community and be there for my family. And what I did was start talking about it vocally so that people could also have permission to do it as well.
That's a great way of modeling it, for sure. Not just letting them know that they won't be able to reach you before 11, but, oh, by the way, you should give it a try, right? It is doable. It is possible, believe it or not, right?
Anything is possible, Joe.
Yeah. I like the 5-minute thing. I like to challenge. That's a big part of my job, is challenging, right? Parameters and assumptions that people have, rules that they have for themselves. And like, oh, but why? But why? So I often use 30 seconds as that rule. Everyone has 30 seconds, right? Starting at that. If you're doing nothing right now, 30 seconds is a huge improvement, right?
Oh, yeah. That's such great advice.
What have you said no to that has made a significant impact in your life?
Your listeners may not know this about me, but my entire community and friends and family know this about me. I do not go out past 5 o'clock ever. And that means if you want me to go to a show with you on Broadway, it has to be a matinee. I don't go out past 5 o'clock because I'm in bed by 7:30. I get up at 4 a.m. And that is something that my community and my friends and my colleagues know so well that they don't even ask. Or sometimes they'll say, you may see on social media that I'm having a birthday party, but it starts at 8 o'clock, which is why I'm not inviting you.
I love that. I love that rule so much. That's great. It becomes uniquely you, but it's so clear too. It's so nice when you have a very clear principle that fits.
And I say it's my policy. That way nobody feels bad and nobody feels sorry for me. Oh, that's so sad. She never goes out past 5 o'clock. Actually, it's my policy to not go out past 5 o'clock so that I can be a high performer and deliver all the things I deliver. I saw Oprah in her 2020 Vision Tour, and she said she doesn't have FOMO, she has JOMO, the joy of missing out. And I have like that too.
I haven't heard that. I love that idea. I really do.
I have the joy of missing out.
Because you know where you stand and you're very clear on that, it's got to be helpful to other people too as they're trying to negotiate. Because gosh, how many times do we all as humans tend to take on other people's emotional management and try to figure out other people's decision making on behalf of them? You're helping people to not do that as much by giving them a very clearly stated policy. I think that's a fascinating idea.
Thank you. And I hope that it also gives people the opportunity to realize I'm not missing out, because the folks who know I'm not going to go out at 5 o'clock, either I create events that are in the afternoon or earlier that invite them to, or they create events that they know I can attend. If they want me there bad enough, they're going to find a way for it to happen.
I like that. It's breaking down the mental model that one is missing out if they don't leave their house by 5 p.m. Okay, so is it not leaving the house at all, or you don't do social events, or what's the specificity around the 5 p.m.?
Because I need 2 hours to wind down from something. So if you want to meet me for tea in the afternoon and it's at 4:30, I'm not going to have a lot of time with you. And it's got to be in my neighborhood so I can walk home, be in the door by 5, unwinding, dinner, tea, bed, sometimes a martini with Joe. But it's literally like I need that 5 to 7 o'clock hour to wind down. And my body knows it. I don't do podcast episodes at 5 o'clock. Anything that's happening is winding down for the day. And I also have a policy. This is an activation for me energetically. At 5 o'clock, an alarm on my phone goes off with very beautiful music that says, "You are patient and loving." And I leave my office, and anything that's going on there that may not be patient and loving, and I walk out of my office and I enter my space with my husband as a patient and loving wife.
I love that. Taking mental notes here and physical notes, as it were. But I love that idea. So is it a recording of you saying this, or did you find this elsewhere? No, it's
beautiful music, and I named the alarm, "You are patient and loving." So it comes up on my screen.
I gotcha.
That's the one notification I have all day long.
Yeah, well, I wasn't going to call you out on that, but it works for you, right? Yeah. I love that. I love that. What in your life feels just about perfect?
I get to choose who I spend time with. That feels pretty perfect. I feel very fortunate that the folks I choose to spend my time with are extraordinary, and we share our values, and we have a common goal of serving humanity. I feel that's pretty amazing and pretty perfect.
And it's like you have a daily reminder of that as well.
In what way?
The fact that you're interacting with these people on a daily basis.
Yeah, I'm extremely grateful. That feels super perfect.
Some people don't appreciate the idea of perfection to that question. So I appreciate that you leaned into it a little bit without saying that it had to be absolutely perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great. Who is someone you admire, and what do you admire about them?
I admire Officer Eugene Goodman. And for the listeners who may not recognize his name, he led the rioters on January 6th away from the Senate and was recently given a congressional gold medal. I admire this person, this man, because he risked his life to protect the folks who were in the Senate chambers. Nobody knew what was going on. He was by himself, and he had the gravitas, the sense, the knowing to just walk in another direction. I admire him so much for that.
I second that for what it's worth. Also, the reason I'm kind of getting a little bit of chills, I had a conversation on this podcast, and I'm racking my brain, and I cannot remember for the life of me who it was that also listed this man as well. This was pretty shortly after it had happened, but yeah, that's talk about an extreme sense of humanity there in the moment, right? A moment of chaos where any one of us would be reasonable for us to just cower and turn inward. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
Or fight. He was leading. He made a decision in that circumstance to be a leader. And that is, I admire him tremendously.
What do you imagine some people admire about you?
I think people admire how much I get done. And I also hope people admire how willing I am to be wrong or to make a mistake. And I share this because I know everybody admires my prolific ability to create. And I hope people can admire, because of the book I wrote, The Influential Voice, my willingness to speak about inclusion as a woman of privilege, a white cis female, because I want to always stay in humility and curiosity. And I'm willing to speak about these hard topics and be wrong or to make mistakes. Again, going back to permission, to give people permission to start having the conversation. So it's my hope that people admire me for that, but I imagine people admire me for getting so much shit done.
Yeah, it's probably a combination of both, right? They're both pretty good, pretty great, admirable qualities. I wonder if I can get your take on this idea that what you just said made me think of. So people talk about always learning, right? Always learning something. You always learn something every day, or constantly being open to learning new things. What do you think about the idea that in order to be open to learning, you need to be open to unlearn?
I believe we have to be open to unlearn. We are taught by our parents who have their version of how to be in the world, and it's not their fault. It's what they know. And we must be conscious and intentional in how we need to unlearn what's no longer serving us, what's no longer serving our relationships, what's no longer serving our belief system. And that is connected to values as well. If your values are no longer in alignment with you and it's something that you picked up from someone else, you have to unlearn those values. And I think it's our responsibility to constantly be curious. Is this really who I am? I always tell my husband, I'm not going to be the same person tomorrow. And he finally is willing to accept that reality. And it drives him crazy, bananas. I know that you're not going to be the same person tomorrow. Do you still feel the same way today? I'm not sure. Okay, all right. And I'm constantly trying to unlearn so that I can be better and do better and show up more fully for my community.
question I had for you just went out because of course I was thinking, your husband might be worried that the parts he loves about you might not be there the next day because you've warned him that you're not going to be the same person.
I never thought of that, Joe, but I will share with you when we were living on 57th and 10th for about 15 years, no, maybe about 12 years together. He was there 3 years before me. I was sitting at the kitchen table and got a download. I have to move. And I thought, oh, crap, I hope Joe comes with me. Because I really knew I have to move. I'm not sure, again, the universe, I'm not sure how. I don't even know why. But it was a trusting that I absolutely leaned into. Reached out to a realtor that day, started looking at apartments. And if you live in New York City and you have a great apartment and a good rent and nice neighbors, you don't move. You just don't. But I had to move. And I had this conversation with Joe, and it was one of the most powerful negotiations I've ever had in my life. I negotiated us moving inside of a very solid marriage. And he was like, I don't know why we're moving. And I said, I don't know either, but I need you to trust me. And that bond was even more fully formed and deepened because of that trust. And we moved from a very dark apartment on 57th and 10th. And I called this in because my word for that year was expansion, and I needed to expand, and I couldn't expand in that other space. So we moved to 55th and 9th, 2 blocks and an avenue away, where I look out the window at the Alvin Ailey Dance Theater. We have wraparound windows, doorman, elevator. There's a courtyard outside for the tenants of this place. And when the city shut down, he thanked me every second of the day. And so I think that the trust that goes along with, I can't promise I'm going to be the same tomorrow, but I can promise I'm always going to love you.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And the next time you need him to trust you implicitly, you both can pull from this experience, right?
Absolutely.
If you were to increase intentionality in your life a little more, what would that look like?
Oh, I just got goosebumps. I think it looks like this. It looks like me showing up as authentically as possible with every single person I come in contact with.
Regardless of how you're feeling in the moment.
Yeah, I would add regardless of how I'm feeling in the moment, whether I'm scared, nervous, uncomfortable, all the things, guarded, connecting. And that goes back to reframe. I'm scared, I'm guarded, I'm deflecting. Let it go, reframe. Hi, how are you today?
Yeah. Okay. So you're not necessarily talking about being vulnerable with strangers, saying, I'm feeling very upset at my husband today, right? To this person that's just walking past.
No, that's oversharing. I think it's more like deeply connecting and being present. Being present. Yeah. That for me is vulnerability. Being present is vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's easy to be distracted. It's easy to not really be listening.
Yeah.
But when you're really present and you're actively listening, that's a shared vulnerability, in my opinion.
Yeah, I like that idea. I love the idea of human connection. To me, that is one of, if I get asked the meaning of life question, to me, it's human connection. That's what it is to me. I can go a little more specific and deeper, but at its root, to me, that's what the meaning of life is to connect meaningfully with another human and as many humans as possible.
For sure. And I live in a city with, I don't even know how many people are in New York City right now, but I know my local florist, Yossi. I did a photo shoot and I went into a shop. I know the guy literally downstairs who's in a cart selling bagels and coffee. I say hi to him every morning. Pamela, who checks me out at the grocery store, was my influential voice in March of 2020 because she sold me groceries and we talked about what I'd be making for dinner every morning at 5 a.m. She was somebody who I connected with in such a vulnerable way because I would buy groceries from her and she'd say, oh, you making enchiladas tonight? Yep. Get another avocado. You're going to need more than one. That's the human connection part. That's the intentionality. I go into the grocery store knowing I'm going to connect with Pamela because she kept it normal when things weren't normal.
I love that. If I may share a little bit here.
I would love that.
So one of my strong interests or passions is foreign languages, different cultures. And I found this philosophy that I adopted early on in learning other languages was it gives you access to a whole other population of people to connect with that you wouldn't have previously been able to. And it's just amazing.
I love that share. And when I was in Russia for 3 months in 1991, at the height of the coup, I had to learn to speak the language. And Russian is not easy. It's not a love language. It's not at all like Spanish or French. There's lots of syllables in the Russian language, all next to each other. But I was determined to be able to communicate with the ballerinas and the dancers that I was spending time with. And so being able to speak a tiny bit of Russian, Меня зовут Trishечка, I was able to connect more deeply to my Russian friends for sure. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, and Меня зовут is the extent of my Russian, by the way. So thank you for pronouncing it correctly and reinforcing that I am kind of there as well.
Amazing.
What else would you like to share about intentionality or anything related to what we've talked about today? Or unrelated, actually, for that matter.
Well, I think one thing your listeners might want to know is that I'm sitting here watching you on a Zoom call. So we are on video, even though you're just experiencing the audio. And Joe, your physical intentionality is so powerful. So I want to just highlight that intentionality is also your physical presence and the way you are on camera right now and how you are showing up on this call and in this conversation feels extremely intentional. And I think because you are masterful at being intentional, it creates a very safe space for your audience or for your guest to be able to show up the way they're showing up. I want to thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind of you. I'm glad that that's the desire or the effect that is the desired effect. So I'm really glad that whatever it is that I'm doing is helping with that.
For sure. And for all of you who are listening, thinking too about when you walk into a room, it's energetically intentional, but also physically intentional. And from a former dancer, everything I did on stage had intention behind it, including the stillness.
Can you expound upon the idea of stillness? I really like the idea of what other thoughts, wisdom might you impart?
When I was dancing, I'm a classically trained dancer. So I studied ballet through college and moved to New York City to pursue a career in dance meant moving into the modern dance world because I like to eat, and being a ballerina was not going to be something that would coexist with me enjoying food. So I wanted to enjoy my body, but I had very skilled technique. So I was one of those modern dancers who had the ferocity of a ballet dancer. So when I would do a triple pirouette or a grand battement that was very beautifully executed and all of this amazing quick petit allegro work, and then I would stop, I could literally feel the audience leaning in. So all the things that I was doing that was so hard and required so much skill and technique washed over them. But the moment I would stop is when they would lean in. And that's when I learned the power of stillness. And it was almost like the fallout or the after effects of any great dancer's virtuosic performance. It takes a second to hit you. And then when it does, to give them that moment of silence and stillness for them to really digest it, that's super powerful. And I teach my speakers to do that now.
Excellent. I was just about to ask, how can the listeners here who may or may not be speakers, how can they take this idea, capitalize upon the stillness in maybe their day-to-day?
I think the easiest way to incorporate this into your life, and you do this with your clients, is wait. Ask the question. Maybe it's why, and wait. Allow that silence to be there. It doesn't have to be uncomfortable. So many people want to fill the space with talking, with movement, with distractions. I've been on a lot of podcasts where the host will talk the entire time. They'll ask me the same question, 4 different versions, before I have a chance to answer it. And that's something that the listener can do right now, is get clear on how to express yourself and communicate effectively, finish your thought, and allow that space to be there.
I love it. Yes. I talk about embracing the silence. And I was wondering, and I love that you've connected those ideas of stillness and silence. You're right. Many people are very uncomfortable, if not programmed to, they're not familiar with the silence, right? You got to fill it. We're filling our days with whatever, we got our devices and if you have silence, which also is a powerful negotiation technique, by the way.
So true.
Say nothing.
That's
and
so
it
true.
doesn't take much.
Yeah. Say nothing when you're asking for your partner's opinion on something. Don't backtrack to make them feel better, right? Give them the opportunity to really answer the question. Or when you're having a sales call, let the information be out there and wait for the response. I love that.
This has been absolutely fabulous. Would you like to share anything else with folks? Tell them how folks can find you, reach out to you.
I would love to share the first chapter of my book with your audience, complimentary. If you go to theinfluentialvoicebook.com/chapter, you can download the chapter on purpose, values, and mission, which is in complete alignment with being intentional. And you can certainly reach out to me on Instagram, Tricia Brouk, and Facebook and LinkedIn. And I am at triciabrouk.com.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's wonderful. And I'll put all that information in the show notes so folks can have access to that. Thank you so much for that, but also your careful consideration of these questions, this conversation. Thank you for your time. I know we're way before 5 p.m., so we were in that safety zone, but I know you're a very busy, deliberate, intentional person. So truly thankful. It's been really nice.
It's been amazing. Thank you so much for having me, Joe.
This has been Intentionally Ever After, hosted by intentional lifestyle coach Joe Bukartek. If you would like to have your own intentional conversation with Joe on or off the air, visit intentionallyeverafter.com. Thanks for listening.